Imagine finding a dusty diary at an antique fair, filled with tales of an abandoned mansion hiding dark secrets. Jake and his friends, Sarah and Mike, decide to explore the place, drawn by an irresistible curiosity, but soon discover there's much more than old stories behind the mansion's walls. In this video, you'll follow a journey full of suspense and mystery, where every step uncovers new secrets, and the friends find themselves trapped in a mental game that challenges their beliefs and sanity. Will they be able to uncover the truth and escape this terrifying place? If you're into stories that keep you on the edge of your seat from start to finish, keep watching. This is a tale that will leave you gripping your chair.
Behind the doors.
Jake walked slowly through the antique fair, a place that had always fascinated him. The stalls were filled with forgotten objects, each with its own stories, its own memories. As he examined an old wall clock, something caught his eye. A dusty diary hidden under a pile of old books. The notebook had a worn leather cover and seemed to almost beg to be opened. Jake couldn't resist and, with a surge of curiosity, picked it up. "Look, Sarah, check out what I found," he shouted, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Sarah, who was examining some old jewelry, turned around, raising an eyebrow. "What's that, Jake? A diary? That's so cliché," she replied with a sarcastic smile. But Jake, undeterred, began flipping through the yellowed pages. "It's not just any diary. Look at this." He pointed to a passage describing an abandoned mansion. "They say whoever enters never comes out. People talk about dark legends surrounding the place." Mike, who had been looking for a new adventure, approached, listening to the conversation. "An abandoned mansion? That's perfect. We should go there. On a full moon night, just the three of us. What do you think, Sarah?" He looked at her, excited. "Oh, you two are unbearable. I'm not sure this is a good idea," Sarah replied, crossing her arms. But the expression on her face showed that her curiosity was piqued. Jake smiled, knowing he had a chance to convince her. "Come on, Sarah, what could go wrong? It's just a mansion. Besides, you always say you don't believe in ghosts. This is your chance to prove you're right," Jake argued, his voice full of enthusiasm. She hesitated, looking at her two friends. The tension between reason and curiosity made her feel alive. "Okay, but if something happens, I'll make sure you two are the first to run out," she said, a half-smile forming on her lips. "Deal! We'll meet at your place tonight," Mike exclaimed, clapping his hands in triumph. "I'll bring a flashlight and some drinks. This is going to be epic." As dusk fell and the full moon rose in the sky, the three friends headed to the mansion. The road leading to the place was narrow and lined with tall trees, their branches intertwining like skeletal fingers. The mansion, an old and imposing structure, stood before them, shrouded in shadows and mystery. "Wow, it's scarier than I imagined," Sarah murmured, observing the deteriorated structure. The broken windows seemed like empty eyes watching them. "Are we really going in?" "Of course. It's now or never," Jake replied, already approaching the door, whose hinges creaked as if they hadn't been moved in decades. "Come on, let's not let fear stop us." As they crossed the dusty threshold, a strange feeling enveloped the group. It was as if an invisible presence were watching them. At the same time, indistinct whispers seemed to echo from the walls, as if the souls of the past were trying to communicate. "Did you hear that?" Sarah asked, her gaze quickly scanning for the source of the whispers. Jake just nodded, feeling a chill run down his spine. "Let's explore. I can't believe we're actually here," Mike said, his voice somewhat hesitant, but the adrenaline of the adventure pushing him forward. They ventured further into the mansion, the sound of their footsteps echoing through the shadows. Each room seemed to tell a story, each object a secret. But there was something more there, something that seemed to pulse in the walls, as if the mansion were alive, breathing with them. And as they delved deeper, curiosity began to mix with a sense of apprehension, as if they were about to awaken something better left sleeping. The echo of the past reverberated through the dark hallways of the mansion, a place that seemed frozen in time. Jake, Sarah, and Mike walked cautiously, their flashlights illuminating the dusty walls and furniture covered in white sheets, like sleeping ghosts. The air was heavy with moisture and a faint odor of mold, mixed with the scent of something older, almost ancestral. The atmosphere was oppressive, but curiosity drove them to move forward. "Look at this," Jake exclaimed, pointing to a wall covered with framed photos. The images showed a family with serious expressions, each with a gaze that seemed to follow the three friends. "These people are strange," murmured Mike, moving closer for a better look. "It's like they're watching us." Sarah frowned, trying to shake off the feeling of discomfort. "It's just an illusion, Mike. These photos are old. We can't let our imagination fool us." "But it's weird," he insisted, his voice trembling slightly. "There's something wrong with this place." As the group continued exploring, Mike strayed a bit, drawn to a door at the end of a long hallway. It was different from the others, more imposing, as if guarding a precious secret. He approached, placing his hand on the doorknob, which seemed to pulse with a strange energy. "Hey, come check this out," he called. But Jake and Sarah were distracted by an old painting on the opposite wall. "No, don't do that, Mike," Jake said, glancing quickly at the door. "If it's locked, there's a reason. Let's keep going." "But what if there's something amazing in there? Something that explains these photos?" Mike argued, his curiosity overcoming his fear. He jiggled the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. "It seems locked, but I feel a strange energy coming from it." Sarah turned, noticing the intensity in Mike's eyes. "Strange energy or not, we need to respect the space. Let's stay away from locked doors." "You don't understand. This place is full of mysteries, and we're here to explore them," Mike insisted, his voice rising. "I don't want to leave without knowing more." The tension in the air intensified for a moment, but it was soon broken by a noise coming from upstairs, the sound of creaking wood as if something were moving. The group exchanged nervous glances, adrenaline starting to surge. "What was that?" Sarah asked, her gaze fixed on the ceiling. "It must be rats or something," Jake responded quickly, but his voice sounded less confident than he'd hoped. "Let's keep going. What else can we discover?" They moved forward, each step echoing through the walls as if the mansion were listening. The atmosphere grew increasingly charged with a sense of despair. The feeling of being watched never left them, and with each new room, the unease increased. "This is really strange," Sarah murmured, stopping in front of a dusty window. "Why would anyone live here? Look at how everything is abandoned." "Maybe it wasn't always like this," Jake suggested, looking at the shadows dancing on the walls. "Maybe there was a time when this place was full of life." Mike moved away from the locked door, still intrigued, and joined the group. "But what happened to that family? Why did they disappear? These photos, they won't leave me alone." The group continued exploring, but the atmosphere was changing. Unexplained noises began to emerge, a whisper here, a crash there. Each sound seemed to carry a message, as if the mansion were trying to communicate with them. Jake felt a chill run down his spine, but curiosity kept them together, pushing them to delve deeper into the mysteries surrounding that place. "Did you hear that?" Jake asked, glancing quickly behind him. "It was like someone was talking." "I heard it too," Sarah replied, her voice tense. "What's happening here?" "Come on, we need to find out the truth. We can't leave now," Mike insisted, his determination overshadowing the fear that was starting to take hold of each of them. They pressed on, even as despair began to creep into their hearts, feeling that the mansion held secrets that cried out to be uncovered. The air inside the mansion was dense and charged with a strange energy, as if the very environment were alive. Sarah, in a moment of curiosity, wiped the accumulated dust off an old mirror leaning against one of the walls. When she looked at her reflection, her eyes widened. The mirror not only reflected her image, behind her spectral figures seemed to dance, like shadows from a forgotten time. She blinked, trying to understand if it was just an illusion caused by the dim light. "Jake, Mike," she shouted, her voice trembling in her throat. "You need to see this." Jake and Mike, who were in another room, ran to her location. "What is it, Sarah?" Mike asked, his face concerned. When they got closer, Jake looked into the mirror and was mesmerized by the vision. This is incredible and terrifying at the same time," Jake murmured, his eyes fixed on the ethereal figures. "What do you see, Sarah?" "Figures. They're dancing, as if they're celebrating something. But at the same time, it feels sad, Sarah replied, her voice almost a whisper. Fear began to mix with curiosity, and she felt a chill down her spine. Mike, who had always been the most skeptical of the group, couldn't suppress a shiver. This doesn't make sense. It can't be real. It's just a trick of the light, right? You said yourself that this place is full of mysteries, Jake retorted, stepping away from the mirror as if the image could reach out to him. We need to understand what's happening here. Determined to explore further, the trio decided to separate momentarily. Sarah, still intrigued by the mirror, stayed behind for a while Jake and Mike ventured into another room. Entering a space filled with personal belongings of the family that once inhabited the mansion, Jake came across a framed portrait of a young woman. Her gaze was penetrating and carried deep sadness. He felt a lump in his throat, as if the woman were trying to communicate with him. "Jake, are you okay?" Mike interrupted, noticing his friend's state. "You look pale." "Look at this," Jake said, pointing to the painting. "This woman, she looks so sad, as if she's trapped here just like us." "Do you really believe in these legends?" Mike questioned, crossing his arms. "It's just a painting, Jake." "But what if it's not?" Jake insisted, walking closer to the portrait. "What if she's the key to understanding all this?" Meanwhile, Sarah, still mesmerized by the mirror, began to feel a presence behind her. The atmosphere around her was changing, and a cold breeze enveloped her. "Who's there?" she asked hesitantly. The response came in the form of a whisper, barely audible. "Help me." The voice was soft but carried a desperation that resonated in her heart. Sarah turned quickly, but there was nothing but the mirror and the mansion's gloom. Jake and Mike, hearing Sarah's call, ran back to her. "What happened?" Jake asked, breathless. I heard a voice. It asked for help," Sarah replied, her eyes wide. "We need to get out of here. This isn't normal." However, as they tried to leave the room, panic set in. The door they had entered through was locked, as if an invisible force were keeping it shut. Jake began banging on the door while Mike tried to turn the knob, but nothing seemed to work. "This can't be happening," Mike shouted, his voice rising in desperation. "What's happening to this place?" "It's like the mansion is holding us," Jake said, looking around. The lights began to flicker, and a sense of claustrophobia took over them. "We need to stay calm. Let's think of a way out." But the voices and whispers began to intensify, creating a deafening echo. Sarah, feeling increasingly suffocated, looked at the mirror again. Maybe the answer is here," she whispered. "Sarah, we can't get carried away by these visions. We need to focus on escaping," Mike said, but his voice was full of doubt. "And what if the only way to escape is to understand what's happening here?" Jake questioned, looking at the young woman in the portrait as if he could hear her story. The mansion seemed to feed on their fears, and as the lights flickered, they realized they were more trapped than they had ever imagined. The tension was mounting, and the feeling that time was running out made every second inside that house feel like an eternity. The heavy air inside the mansion made every breath feel like an effort. Jake, with his heart racing, separated from his friends, drawn to a slightly open door at the end of a dark hallway. Moonlight filtered through the dusty windows, casting dancing shadows on the walls. As soon as he entered the room, the smell of mold and rotting wood enveloped him. But what truly caught his attention was a dusty diary on an old table. With reverent care, he wiped the dust from the notebook's surface and opened its yellowed pages. The handwriting was delicate, but the words carried immense weight. "Anna," he murmured, the name of the young woman in the portrait now feeling more real as the accounts of her tragic life unfolded before him. Jake began reading aloud, as if the words could bring him closer to her. "Today, fear has taken hold of me. Loneliness is an unbearable companion." He stopped, feeling a chill down his spine. "What happened to you, Anna?" he whispered, almost as if expecting an answer. Meanwhile, in another part of the mansion, Sarah was walking hesitantly down the hallway. The walls seemed to close in around her, and a shiver ran down her spine when she heard a soft whisper calling her name. "Sarah, come." The voice was familiar but distant, like an echo lost in time. Looking ahead, a female figure appeared, ethereal and pale. It was Anna, her sad and pleading eyes seeming to pierce through the barrier of time. "You need to help me," the woman whispered, her voice resonating in Sarah's mind. The young woman felt a surge of compassion and fear at the same time. "How can I help you?" she asked, her voice trembling. Anna reached out her hand, but before Sarah could touch her, the figure disappeared into a mist. Sarah's heart raced, and she wondered if what she had seen was real or just an illusion brought on by the pressure of the place. Meanwhile, Mike, who had wandered off in a daze, was in a nearby room, surrounded by old objects that seemed to whisper secrets with every movement. He leaned his head against the wall, trying to catch his breath, but the voices wouldn't stop. "Mike! Mike! Come!" they called, wrapped in a seductive tone that made him question his sanity. The shadow of a figure slowly approached, and his mind began to spin in a whirlwind of doubts. "This isn't happening," he muttered to himself, trying to maintain his composure. With each step the shadow took, Mike felt the tension increase. "Who are you?" he shouted, his voice echoing through the empty space. "What do you want from me?" The shadow hesitated for a moment, and he felt an intense cold. "You know the truth," the voice whispered, like a cutting wind that pierced his being. Mike began to tremble, feeling small and vulnerable under the gaze of the entity that was now closer. Jake, distracted by his discoveries in the diary, didn't realize how much time had passed. His mind full of questions, he closed the notebook and decided he needed to find his friends. A sense of urgency overcame him. "Sarah! Mike!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the empty corridors. But the only response was the echo of his own words. The mansion seemed to live and breathe, as if absorbing the energy of the three young people, feeding on their fears and uncertainties. Meanwhile, Sarah, still shaken by Anna's vision, felt compelled to look for the others. "Jake! Mike!" she called, her voice trembling. The echo of her call mingled with the mansion's whispers, creating a strange and unsettling melody. The feeling of despair hit her hard, but there was something else, a growing determination to discover what was really happening in that place. The three, each battling their own demons, began to realize that the mansion was not just an abandoned building, but a prison for lost souls and dark secrets. Anna's stories, the voices tormenting Mike, and the disturbing vision haunting Sarah were just the beginning of a mental game that would unite and test them in ways they never imagined. They were about to discover that what kept them apart might also be the key to their freedom. The air inside the mansion was impregnated with an oppressive silence as Jake, Sarah, and Mike reunited in the room with the old dining table. The flickering light from candles that seemed to have been burning for decades cast dancing shadows on the dust-covered walls. The table was impeccably set with white porcelain plates and crystal glasses that reflected the light in a surreal way, as if awaiting guests who would never arrive. "This is strange," Mike murmured, cautiously approaching the table. "Why is everything so neatly arranged here? It's like someone's been expecting us." His voice was a mix of curiosity and fear as he lightly touched one of the glasses, feeling the coldness of the crystal. "I don't like this," Sarah responded, crossing her arms as if trying to protect herself from an invisible feeling. "We need to get out of here. We need to find a way out." Her voice was full of urgency, but Jake interrupted her. "Wait," he said, staring intently at the portrait of the young woman that still lingered in his mind. "Remember what we found? The woman in the portrait. She was the last one to enter this mansion, and they say her soul is trapped here. She's seeking company." Jake's revelation hung in the air like an echo, and a tense silence settled between them. "You're saying we're here as guests for some kind of macabre party?" Mike shook his head, trying to dismiss the idea. "This doesn't make sense. We need to leave, not stay and talk about ghosts." "But what if that's the key?" Jake insisted, his eyes fixed on the table. "We need to understand what happened to her. If we're here because of her, maybe we can help somehow." Sarah looked at Jake, her expression a mix of skepticism and concern. "And what if helping her just gets us more trapped? What else can this place do to us?" The tension was growing, and the void around them seemed to close in, as if the mansion were listening to their words. "I don't know, but we can't just stand here. We can't leave through that door, and breaking the windows doesn't seem like a good idea, Mike said, gesturing nervously. We need to figure out what we want. What brought us here? I want to leave, Sarah replied, her voice a whisper, but Jake was determined. He approached the table and with a firm gesture began to arrange the plates, as if preparing the space for a banquet. If her soul is trapped here, maybe we need to connect with her. We need to understand what happened. You're going crazy, Mike exclaimed, looking at Jake as if he were a stranger. You really think playing along with this is a good idea? I'm not playing. Jake turned, frustration evident on his face. If she's trapped, maybe we can free her. And who knows, maybe that will help us get out too. The atmosphere in the room seemed to intensify, as if the very objects around them were paying attention to the conversation. The sound of the wood creaking under the weight of time echoed, and the candles flickered, creating a play of light that seemed to dance in response to what was being said. If we're going to do this, we need to do it together, Sarah said, her voice finally firm. We need to stay united, not let her divide us. She looked at her friends, seeking confidence in their eyes. Whatever is here, we need to face it. Jake nodded, a determined gleam in his eyes. Then let's do it. Let's call the woman. If her soul is trapped here, we need to let her know we're here to help. The three positioned themselves around the table, and Jake began speaking aloud, his voice echoing in the room. If you're here, if your soul is trapped in this place, we want to help. We want to understand. The tension increased, and a chilling cold began to envelop the room, as if the very house were responding to their call. The atmosphere grew denser, as the echo of their words mingled with the whispers that seemed to emanate from the walls. The table was now like an altar between them and the unknown, and the sense that something was about to happen hung heavily in the air. The atmosphere in the mansion was charged with tension and despair. Jake, Sarah, and Mike gathered in a dark corner of the room, where the flickering light of the candles cast dancing shadows on the walls. The echo of their breathing was almost deafening, and each of them struggled against the fear that seemed to materialize around them. The group knew they needed to confront the figure of the woman who haunted them, believing that this might be the key to their release. We need to find the woman, Jake said, his voice trembling but determined. If her soul is trapped here, maybe we can help her move on, and maybe by doing that we can escape too. And what if she doesn't want to be helped? Sarah asked, her gaze worried. What if she's the reason we're trapped here? Mike, who had calmed down a bit, intervened. I think we have to take the risk. What else can we do? Staying here will only make us more vulnerable. He looked into his friend's eyes, seeking the courage that was also waning. Reluctantly agreeing, the group decided to follow the echoes of the whispers that seemed to guide them toward the heart of the mansion. As they walked, the walls seemed to close in around them, as if the mansion were trying to keep them imprisoned. The hallway was long and narrow, the old paintings on the walls becoming increasingly oppressive, the once smiling faces now distorted as if they were mocking the misfortune of the intruders. When they reached a large room, they found it illuminated by an ethereal light that seemed to emanate from the center. In the middle of the room, the figure of the woman appeared, draped in a flowing white dress, her pale face and sad eyes fixed on them. "Why did you come?" the woman asked, her voice soft but laden with pain. "You shouldn't be here." "We came to help you," Jake responded, feeling an inexplicable connection with her. "We know you're trapped. We want to understand what happened." "You can't help," she murmured, the sadness in her voice making everyone's heart ache. "My soul is bound to this place, and the truth I carry prevents me from leaving." "What is the truth?" Sarah questioned, curiosity overcoming her fear. "Why can't you be free?" The woman hesitated, and a shadow seemed to cross her gaze. "I am your insecurities, your deepest fears. Each of you carries a part of me, and the more you try to escape, the stronger I become." "What do you mean by that?" Mike asked, his pale face lighting up with understanding. "You're a part of us?" "Yes," the woman replied, a lament in her voice. "I am the anguish of being unrecognized, the fear of never being enough. You need to face what you're hiding. Only then can I move on." Jake, feeling an immense weight on his shoulders, took a step forward. I'm a descendant of the family that lived here, aren't I? That's why I'm trapped. I needed to face the truth about what happened to you. You must reveal the truth your family hid, the woman said, her voice now firmer. Only then can we all be free. As soon as Jake spoke, a crackling sound filled the air, and the mansion seemed to react to the revelation. The walls trembled, and the whispers grew louder, almost as if the place itself were screaming. The truth, echoed around them. Jake, what do you know? Sarah asked, her gaze fixed on him. What are you hiding? He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the revelation. My family's story isn't just about prosperity. There was an accident, a tragedy. The woman you see, she was the sister of one of my ancestors. They condemned her to be forgotten. I always knew, but I never wanted to confront it. Jake's words reverberated in the room, and the woman began to slowly disappear, her sad smile transforming into a hopeful expression. Find the truth and free yourselves, all of you. With that, the room was engulfed in intense light, and the mansion seemed to calm down, as if finally at peace. Jake, Sarah, and Mike exchanged glances, the understanding of what they needed to do now clear in their minds. They were ready to face whatever came next.